what we're going to move on to then is, I would say, probably his most controversial film. It's the one I mentioned in my introduction, which is the super fun and exciting and really not at all miserable Funny Games, Scott.
Yeah, it's definitely one that put him on the map, I would say. It's Funny Games. I'm going to do Funny Games dirty, I think, in as much as I knew the trick of it long before watching it. And I think that this film, and presumably the later remake as well, would work much better without knowing that. And therefore, I caution you, gentle listener, about progressing further if you've not seen it. And I mean, I know this is a 1997 film, but that just means there's a generation of people who might not have heard of it. So just consider yourself suitably be spoiler warned. The well-heeled Schober family, Anna, Georg and Georg Jr., played by Susanne Lothar, Ulrich Mühe and Stefan Klepinski, head off to their lakeside holiday home, boat in tow. But before they've had a chance to do so much as settle in, they are bothered by Peter and Paul, played by Frank Gehrig and Arno Frisch, supposedly to borrow a few eggs on behalf of their neighbours. But that is not their real intention, as they begin a violent home invasion that's initially straight out of a slasher movie, were it not for the moments where Paul launches another invasion through the fourth wall. In terms of plot recaps, I suppose home invasion with the terrified family trying to escape and suffering violent indignities for it is pretty much all you need. Soon enough, the more interesting aspect that develops out of it is that their fourth wall endangerment, and I suppose the attempt at making the audience complicit in the suffering of the characters. Frankly, I feel that might be giving it a little bit too much of a generous spin, particularly as Haneke himself apparently calls this an incredibly violent but otherwise pointless film. I'm not even sure that it's technically all that violent, as almost all of the violence, and the most shocking acts at least, occur off camera.
And intentionally so, yeah.
Yeah, arguably gives some more impact in a graphic close-up, as might be seen in the horror flicks that I presume he's critiquing. The very act of smashing the fourth wall in such a manner means that Haneke is again keeping us at arm's length from the characters and their struggles, and certainly for me, knowing this was the real funny game of the film, definitely kept me from even being slightly invested in it, even in the early running, so any kind of sucker punch that this might have brought to an audience was well scouted and negated, which does leave this film feeling, well, pointless. So, yay? I don't know quite how to take Funny Games in the abstract. I've seen it said that it's a criticism of the Germanic Heimat films, homeland films, and although it seems as well tailored to be a complete rejection of horror film tropes and concepts, which of course I completely agree with, it's a trash genre for trash people, but I'm not sure that Funny Games would be convincing anyone else of this. I will add again that the Haneke table stakes are suitably met, even this relatively early outing, with solid turns in front of and behind the camera. It's just that the film that's been so precisely made seems to have no precise point. It's an interesting conversation piece, I suppose, and a fairly audacious thing to try and sneak in front of an audience, but it's not going to last all that long in my mind. So a somewhat caveated recommendation then, but I have to confess, it is something that is more likely to land with the audience of people who listen to movie podcasts than general audiences, I would think. So on that basis, it is worth a look. It's an interesting film. Yeah, but yeah, knowing the trick of it going into it really sort of defangs an awful lot of it and makes it kind of not laughable, but sort of even more detached than I think Haneke himself would have wanted you to be. It's very much sort of, yeah, see what you're doing there. Aye, okay, cool, yeah. And then it just goes on for a while and it ends, and it's certainly a thing that I watched. Yeah.
I honestly don't think knowing the general idea behind it made any difference to it all. Although the first time the fourth wall was broken, I was really sitting on edge, like, oh, you're going to be one of those. I'm going to hate you, aren't I? And it's not how it turned out. With the possible exception of one of these 6 films, there's none of these films that aren't at least interesting. I was never bored by any of these films.
Yeah.
There was enough to hold my interest, whether it was like just how it looked or how it was acted or the story or the themes, the characters, or in this case, like, yo, what's he saying? You know, yes, I've seen too, Scott, that it's at least Austrian critics saw it as a attack, pastiche, something on the Heimat genre. Yeah. Whereas
I don't get that. Maybe it's because I don't really understand what the Heimat genre would be. And
yeah, that's it.
But I mean, it seems it doesn't seem like that at all, from what I understand and what little reading up about Heimat films I could find on Wikipedia. It seems absolutely nothing to do with that. But who am I to say?
Yeah, but I was going to say is yes, that's interesting that English-speaking audiences at least saw it as like slasher film stuff. What I saw it more as was something more because I guess like again the violence you don't see in it is sort of more shocking for that. But when you see a character with their head missing and damaged by a shotgun in a way that shotguns don't, it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
I really don't believe that's a thing that happens. Yeah, it's when you don't see the violence, it's more shocking, and that's the point. He said that, like classic horror films, it's the sound of the monster behind the door, or the sound of steps and the stairs is much more scary than seeing the monster. Often that's ridiculous. See what he's doing there, and I understand his influences, and but like the actual film itself and the violence of it never had any effect on me because it's. The sort of violence that's in the film it's not the sort of violence that ever happens. There's nothing scary to me about it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay, it's a large planet with a lot of people on it. Something like this may have happened, but it's so rare as to like be inconsequential, to not count. It doesn't happen, despite what things like the Daily Mail might want you to do. I want you to believe. Because what it made me think of, and I don't know if you remember this film, Scott, but it made me think a lot of Cherry Tree Lane.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all. I mean, home invasion kind of stuff has been around for an awfully long time, but there seemed to be a little blush of them round about Cherry Tree Lane, the first Purge film, and others that were around that kind of era. There was a little glut of home invasion paranoia going to it. It did come to mind, although obviously predates that quite significantly.
Yeah, but that to me was very much a Daily Mail film, and I suppose it's not quite the same film, but caught in that kind of on that trajectory. I guess it finishes with some terrible crap like Harry Brown.
Yeah,
but because that's it doesn't happen. This has no fear for me. This is not a thing I worry about ever happening. So it has no power over me in that manner. But it's at least interesting. Although, I'm slightly puzzled as to why it takes like the third person that they meet to ask why they're wearing gloves, because that's just weird. Why did nobody question that before? Like, these people are not acting like sensible human beings.
Yes.
Haneke's idea behind this though is like he said, I give the audience several chances to leave, so the idea is to somehow make them complicit in the violence, to critique that sort of that violence in film, those genres.
I do hate that as a reasoning. For reasons I described at some point in the past about Spec Ops: The Line, which tried the same trick and it didn't work then and doesn't work here.
It doesn't work because, well, let's just take perhaps the basest reasons. Like, people have paid to see this film. They're not going to just walk out because you're suggesting they walk out. They want to see how it finishes, and you can't say they're complicit in that because you've made a thing for people to watch.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yes, and it's not like... It almost worked a little better in Spec Ops: The Line, because if you did stop playing that, then the events wouldn't happen, but the film's going to keep on running regardless, as if you left the seat in the audience. So, yeah. No, thank you.
So with what it's saying, I don't think it works. His reasoning is flawed, let us say. However, yes, it's still very well made. And it's interesting, and there is one section of the film that I genuinely really like, and it's the most human section, and also the most believable. And that's the section when the violent people are gone, and the horrible thing has happened, and you have the two people left, and they're telling each other they love each other, and then they're making sort of sensible decisions, get dressed, put shoes on so you can run, do this thing, and there's a real humanity in that section, and they feel like people. They don't feel just like, archetypal or cut-out characters in the films like Ulrich Moore and his real wife, Susanna Lothar. They feel like people there. They feel like human beings. And that sort of section where it's like nothing's happening really is by far the most rewarding section of the film for me.
Yeah.
And it helps brilliant actors. I really like Ulrich Moore. He's superb in The Lives of Others. So yeah, there are sections there where it's like, actually, it's the aftermath of this thing that's happened to them, sort of. And that's actually the most interesting section. And I'm kind of, see, that got me thinking, like, my interest was held throughout the film. And it's quite interesting too, like the two killers the actors playing that were told to play it as a comedy, and the Ulrich Moore and Susanna Lothar were told to play it as a horror film or a drama, to get that really weird juxtaposition there about how they felt about it. Yeah, it held my attention. I sort of lost the point I was making there. Damn. I made a different point and forgot the one I was originally making. That's tangents for you. Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I don't, like, kind of captivated because I was like, what's the point he's making? I was getting vaguely aware of the other stuff I'd said. I learned afterwards. It was only kind of vaguely what he'd said it was about beforehand, and I'm watching thinking, what's this about? Is this actually saying anything? And like, you know, by the end, no, I think is the answer. Pretty much no. But it held my interest. It captivated me. So I guess that's good. Although why there was a basically shot-for-shot remake made in English for some reason is beyond me. I don't understand the purpose of that at all. So my biggest question coming out of this is, yeah, this isn't all that great to begin with, and then there was a shot-for-shot remake made. Why?
No particular idea other than, again, it was in the middle of that. That remake came in the middle of that whole little cottage industry of home invasion stuff. It might have just been a kind of almost ready-made project that you could put greenlight as long as you run it through Google Translate, and because it might have filled that niche. But
there were a bunch of them. There was one other one we saw in a bit of time with Liv Tyler as well. What was that called?
I know the film you're talking about, but I can't remember. It was called something quite silly, if I remember. It wasn't quite The Happening, but yeah.
The Stabbed ones, no?
Yes.
Yeah, so there really was a whole bunch of them around that time, wasn't there?
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe that's why, but it still seems entirely unnecessary.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
To remake that, especially when it's shot for shot. It's like, I mean, it's better Michael Haneke making a shot-for-shot remake of his own film than something like Gus Van Sant for some reason doing it with Alfred Hitchcock's film. That was strange. But The Strangers, was that it?
That sounds right, yeah.
Strangers, yeah. Yeah, a whole glut of them. That was so... Strangers was 2008. So yeah, around about that time, I don't know what was going on in the mid-2000s. But I'll blame the Daily Mail because, well, you know, it works most years.
Yeah.
So why not that one?
It's normally the case, right?
Yes.